Kia ora koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. And look, thank you for that lovely introduction. It is really a pleasure to be here with you all to outline the Coalition Government's approach to our first budget. Thank you to Mark Skelly, President of the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce, together with your board and team for hosting me. And thank you to all of the hard-working employers and small businesses who have given up your morning to be here. It's great to have you with us. Let me also acknowledge in his absence local MP for Hutt South and Associate Minister of Finance Chris Bishop. Bish can't join us today. He's on his way to the mainland where he will be talking about our plans for delivering better infrastructure. He did let slip to me that he'd rather be in the Hutt. Look, I'm told that this is the first time in 14 years that a Minister of Finance has gone outside central Wellington for the first official pre-budget speech. And I'm delighted to be taking a new approach with you today, not just because I lived my childhood in the Hutt, but also because I think it's appropriate that our government's first budget breaks from the past. New Zealand in 2024 needs a different sort of budget from those we've had in recent times. This year, we simply can't afford a budget that runs long on good intention but falls short on delivery. As you all well know, ours is a time when every dollar counts, and our budget will reflect that reality. You all understand what we face. New Zealand's economy is in a tricky spot. Inflation is too high and has been for almost 3 years. Interest rates have soared and are biting homeowners and businesses alike. Unemployment has risen and growth has stalled in 4 of the past 5 quarters. This is all taking its toll on New Zealanders. Everyday workers are hurting, and the reality of your struggle is impossible to ignore. And as I've put together my first budget, the people foremost in my mind have been those I've called the squeezed middle. The everyday Kiwis who've soldiered on through a prolonged cost of living crisis, who work hard and yet experience a seemingly endless struggle to get ahead, who worry about your mortgage and the unexpected bill, and yet don't ask much from the government. You want decent health services, good schools, law and order, and a fair go. And our government is clear-eyed about the raw deal experienced by too many Kiwis in recent times. Workers have endured 14 years without any adjustment to tax brackets. For a median income worker, that's meant the average tax you pay has increased from around 15% in 2011 to around 21% today. These tax increases helped fund a massive government spending spree, with costs up 80% in just 6 years. Yet even with these record levels of government spending, you've watched health waiting lists grow, educational achievement drop, and violent crime soar. Everyday New Zealanders working have been left to wait in line while beneficiaries, government agencies and consultants get a boost. And here's a big cheers to the consultants in the audience. Today's economic situation is also tough for the employers and business people in this room and across the country. Many of you stoically kept your heads above water post-pandemic, swallowing higher costs and doing everything you could to keep staff. You've hung tough while desperately willing inflation and interest rates to come down. Our government is on your side, and we are putting our shoulder to the inflation fight. We know that for so long as you're struggling, New Zealand will struggle. And we're determined to deliver you the economic conditions you need to succeed. And it goes without saying that today's economic situation is also challenging for the government books. Our coalition inherited a structural deficit, with government spending running far ahead of what New Zealand could afford. The last government was well and truly spending beyond its means. And in recent months, that underlying imbalance has been made worse by significant downgrades in the country's growth forecasts. You only have to look at the government's monthly financial statements to see the impact. Core Crown revenue has been lower than expected, with the corporate tax take significantly lower in recent months. And all of these factors add up to a more difficult fiscal situation than forecasters were picking when our government came to office. I won't share figures with you today. Treasury has not yet presented me their final budget forecasts. What I will share with you is that in my first 6 months as Finance Minister, each Treasury update seems to be worse than the last. Sadly, I have learned to dread what comes out of the forecasters' mouths when they come into my office. And given this, I certainly don't expect any windfalls before budget day. Instead, our government has taken the responsible approach of preparing for a world in which the books could get worse before they get better. I need not dwell on these challenges. You understand the reality. I'd simply say this: it is darkest before the dawn. And our government will not overreact to worsening forecasts. Instead, our task is to get on with making the economic changes New Zealand needs and that we were elected to deliver. Cost of living relief, fairer tax, better value from public spending, balanced books for lower debt, and a stronger, more productive economy. And our first budget will make progress on all these fronts. The budget, of course, won't be an instant fix. Instead, it will lay the ground for steady progress for today, tomorrow, and the longer term. The good news is that the opportunities in front of our country are far greater than the mistakes we leave behind us. New Zealand's economic fundamentals remain impeccable. Incredible natural resources, a growing population, smart people, leading industries and exporters, some of whom are in this room, secure borders, and a global reputation as a safe haven with great institutions and stable rule of law. What's more, we have a government that's on the side of wealth creation, of innovation, enterprise, effort and industry, and a government with a credible plan to restore fiscal discipline, close the deficit and pay down debt. If I could bet on any country in the world, I'd bet on New Zealand. So what can you expect from the budget? Well, obviously it won't be a big spending budget. This is not the time for the government to sweep up yet more of your income in order to redistribute it to a range of well-intentioned but ill-thought-through initiatives. New Zealand has tried that approach and it failed you. This is a time for care, discipline and restraint. But nor is it the time for austerity. A budget of the sort suggested by a few commentators who seem enthusiastic to see the mistakes of history repeated. Well, our government knows how devastating it would be if we were to give up on overdue tax relief or drastically cut back on investment and public services and to downsize our ambitions for growing New Zealand's economy. That approach would be bad for Kiwi families and it would be bad for your businesses. Instead, ours will be a moderate, responsible budget that charts a sensible middle course, laying the foundation for a stronger, more productive economy while giving Kiwis a helping hand. Let me comment on 3 immediate priorities you can expect to see delivered in our budget. Number 1, our budget will prioritise investments in the public services that matter most to you. Our budget will prioritise targeted new spending for the essential frontline services you rely on. you can expect a significant funding boost for the health system and targeted new investment in other essential frontline services, including education, disability services and police. Our approach is about more than new money, because the investments we make will be resolutely focused on frontline service delivery, putting more money where it will deliver results that matter for you. Number 2, our budget will deliver personal income tax reduction for working Kiwis. We will be sticking with Kiwis through the economic rough patch and ensuring you get to the other side stronger and better off than you are today. We've already announced the Family Boost payment, where eligible households get up to 25% of their early childhood education fees rebated. That's up to $975 every 3 months, straight into people's bank accounts. And we've adjusted the Bright Line test back to 2 years and begun restoring interest deductibility for residential rental property to make the income tax system more consistent and coherent and to put downward pressure on rents. I can confirm that our budget will deliver further tax relief. The focus will be income tax relief aimed at middle and lower income workers. The relief will be meaningful but modest. It is overdue. Unlike most developed countries, New Zealand has made no adjustments to tax brackets to compensate for rapid inflation in recent years. Instead, New Zealanders haven't seen any changes to personal income tax rates and thresholds for around 14 years, despite prices being 40% higher now than they were in 2010. So I'm very pleased to announce today that our tax relief package will increase the take-home income of 83% of individual New Zealanders over the age of 15 and 94% of households. We will responsibly deliver these lower taxes for low and middle income families by fully funding them with a package of careful savings and targeted revenue measures. This is the approach we campaigned on taking. It's the approach the OECD's economists have advised us to take, and it's the plan each of our ministers have worked hard to deliver. Now, I am aware that there are some who think it is never the right time for tax reduction and who will search for any excuse to oppose it. So let me confirm 2 important aspects of our government's approach to tax relief. Number 1, our tax relief will be funded from within the operating allowance through a mixture of savings, reprioritisation and additional revenue sources. This means funding our tax package will not add to net core Crown debt. Second, Treasury modelling indicates that fiscally neutral tax relief of the sort we're delivering, financed through reduced government consumption, reduces inflationary pressure and nominal interest rates. This is mainly because there is generally a lower multiplier on tax relief than for general government consumption. This means our decision to fund tax relief in the budget will not add to inflation. Increases to the current income tax thresholds will allow hardworking New Zealanders to keep more of what they earn. It'll compensate for the effects of fiscal drag on average tax rates, and it will ensure there is a greater financial return from work. Tax relief will be good for our economy. Number 3, our budget will deliver durable savings to support investments today and to get the government books back into balance. The last government was unable to control its spending and stick to the allowances it set for itself. This led to a massive increase to government debt and an unsustainable fiscal trajectory. Our government has set an operating allowance of less than $3.5 billion for this budget. That's less than the previous government's allowance, and it will be adhered to, a first in recent years. That has been possible because of our government's willingness to redirect existing spending to a better purpose. It may be a surprise to some, but certainly not to me, that we can and we should always be looking for ways to work better, smarter and more efficiently with taxpayers' money. On taking office at the end of last year, we acted quickly with our mini-budget to rein in government spending, banking $7.5 billion of immediate savings and quickly setting up a program to find $1.5 billion of ongoing annual savings across government agencies. I am confirming today that we have met that savings target. It's taken a lot of work to get there. We set every government agency its own target and tasked chief executives with putting forward proposals that they thought made sense and that could be delivered without compromising quality public services. We then reviewed their proposals line by line, and I have the spreadsheets to prove it. We said no to several of the proposals, and in other cases, agencies who went line by line through their programs were actually able to uncover even greater opportunities for savings than we had initially targeted. The end result is that our budget will deliver durable savings from government departments, delivered through reductions in back office costs, less money for consultants, and decisions to stop go-nowhere policies and well-intended but ultimately lower value programs. This has meant that in the case of some agencies, including the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Police, Oranga Tamariki and the Defence Force, every single dollar of savings found will be redirected towards improving the frontline services that agency is responsible for delivering. To take one example, earlier this week we announced savings of just over $440 million over 4 years found in corrections through our savings exercise. That's $110 million each year that is now working harder for New Zealanders, contributing to 685 new frontline staff, extending rehab programs to support more remand prisoners, and keeping New Zealanders safe by extending Waikeria Prison. I want to today put on the record my thanks and appreciation to the many public servants who have made this savings work possible. I have been struck by their professionalism and their integrity, the men and women who have gone about finding savings across these agencies are good New Zealanders. And you should know that many of the people who serve you wholeheartedly share your impatience to see better results for the taxpayer dollar. Our budget also contains measures to generate new revenue, introducing user pay immigration services, stopping depreciation on commercial buildings, taxing online casino gambling, and empowering the IRD to go after people who don't comply with their tax obligations. This responsible approach means our budget will chart a path back to financial sustainability and progress our short-term fiscal goals and longer-term objectives. These are to put net debt as a percentage of GDP on a downward trajectory towards 40%, working towards a surplus via a steadily improving trajectory for the operating balance, and reducing core Crown expenses as a proportion of GDP. Now, achieving these fiscal goals will require more than one budget. We won't undo in 1 year problems that have built up over 6. The road ahead will require a continuous approach of careful spending, sensible reprioritisation and thoughtful policy decisions. With this new normal, we will get our economy back in balance and back on track. But I'm conscious that in addition to dealing with the immediate challenges we face, every budget must make its contribution to building the better New Zealand that we all want to see 10, 15, 20 years from now. Now, that means ensuring that we invest in the long-term infrastructure needed to support a resilient and growing economy. With an economy far less dependent on carbon emissions, better prepared for a warmer climate, better equipped to contribute to regional and global security, and far better at maximising the potential of each New Zealander. So in this year's budget, you can expect to see investments designed to further each of those goals. And I want to take a final moment this morning to explore one such critical area, a seed we will sow in this budget and from which in time we expect great things will come. That is social investment. Social investment is about driving better results from social services, particularly for our most vulnerable New Zealanders, who are too often failed by the status quo. It's about intervening early to prevent a child's life from veering off track. It's about fulfilling human potential. Because the sad reality is that despite successive governments investing in these aspirations and currently investing more than $70 billion every year into good-intentioned social services, we are not seeing the outcomes we want. We can see the lack of appropriate support for the most vulnerable reflected in rises in welfare dependency, declining educational attendance and achievement levels, and rising rates of youth and violent crime. Social investment is a systematic way of using data, evidence, and modern analytics to invest in earlier and better intervention that breaks those cycles of despair. This year's budget will put in place the essential foundations to bring social investment to life. So today I'm announcing that we will establish a new social investment agency to replace the Social Wellbeing Agency, effective from 1 July this year. This standalone central agency will lead the development of social investment across government, helping us achieve better results from our social service expenditure with smarter use of data, evidence and analytics. We will establish a social investment fund as a vehicle for future social investments to be managed by the Social Investment Agency, with a brief to directly commission outcomes for vulnerable New Zealanders and to work with community, non-government organisations and iwi providers. The fund will begin investing in 2025, but I'm announcing it now as it will be a new way for the government to invest and it will take time to design. Over time, I expect the fund to grow in partnership with other funders to deliver at scale with a wide portfolio of investments. We will also establish a social investment board made up of real-world experts who will provide external challenge and guidance as we drive social investment forward. This work is of personal importance to me, and it's important to many ministers across our government. When I took the social investment proposals I've just shared with you to Cabinet, I suggested a small ministerial group could form and meet regularly to oversee the work. I was happily overwhelmed with requests from ministers asking to be added to that group. At latest count, we have more than 16 portfolios represented in the social investment ministerial group. I think this interest reflects how seriously ministers take the challenge of doing better with the social services that government funds. In closing, let me finish with my sense of optimism for New Zealand. This year's budget is a critical step in our plan to strengthen the economy and deliver New Zealanders the cost of living relief, higher incomes and better public services they deserve. We want our country to be a better place to do business, to invest, to innovate, to take risks, to build things, to make things, to hire people, to grow and to raise our children. And our government's approach to fiscal sustainability will be continued through future budgets. New spending initiatives will be targeted, effective and within our means. Our priority areas will continue to be hard-working, everyday New Zealanders and the frontline services like health, education and police that you rely on. Our plan will make New Zealand a much wealthier country where our people can earn more, live better and expect greater opportunities for our children and grandchildren. And I very much look forward to sharing this plan in full on Budget Day. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Minister. Rob Babcock, Whitehead Robertson Research Institute. You spoke about the future, and at the heart of that future is high-value manufacturing and high technology. This valley has been at the heart of that and the nursery of many of those new industries. But we're at a critical point. A year's time to make the investment in the infrastructure and the technology in the background will be too late. We're at a really critical time. I wonder, is there any hope for the Valley in this year's budget, in what you might do?
Well, Tech Valley, as my friend Chris Bishop calls it, will continue to be Tech Valley and will continue to be a beacon, I think, not only for investment in manufacturing and design and engineering, but also a hub that brings together people with the research, the science skills, and the willingness to invest in businesses. So in terms of the hope that you asked for, I truly believe that one of the best things we can do to give people confidence about the future is let them know that we're doing our bit to lean against inflation so that interest rates can come down and people can feel confident about borrowing again. To give confidence that we will continue to invest in the public services and infrastructure that we all rely on, and to give you confidence that we see research, science and technology playing a critical part in New Zealand's future.
Minister Philip Barry with TDD Advisory. Congratulations firstly on your forthcoming budget and for delivering on many of those promises that you made. Great to hear the focus on social investment too. My question though is about public sector cuts. No one likes to see people lose their job, but no one benefits from a flourishing and efficient public sector. So the question is, do you have a sense yet for how much further we have to go in that area to get the government back focusing on its core business and delivering that effectively?
Look, as I said, we are confident now that the proposals we're progressing in our budget have delivered on our savings target. And what that involves is a combination of different things, in some cases reducing consultant and contractor spend, in many cases not filling vacancies, in other cases restructuring agencies. And you have seen that occurring in real time. And I share the same sentiment that you have, which is that any New Zealander losing their job is something that I think gives us all pause. What gives me confidence is that in our budget, I have been advised that when you tally up the new jobs we will create through our investments in frontline services, and the police and corrections officers and health workers and the like, that new job creation will be greater than the back office roles that we are disestablishing.
It's a quiet room. There's a chance.
Minister, AAP has reported an increased focus on PPPs for funding investment, infrastructure investment. Can you talk about the parameters around that?
Well, look, New Zealand has an infrastructure deficit. It's estimated to be more than $100 billion. And if you're living in the Hutt Valley, you can see that because we miss out on some of the areas that could be developed for housing because we don't have the transport infrastructure. Our commutes often take too long because we don't have the transport infrastructure. Whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, there's a lot of investment that needs to be done. So our government's humble about the fact that we won't do it all by ourselves. We need to partner with private capital to get these big projects built, and that means exploring new ways of funding and financing these projects. And the good news is this is already normal around the rest of the world, so we're not having to reinvent a wheel. But absolutely, partnering with the private sector to deliver big projects, that's on our agenda. You know, something I'd like to see is more of our Kiwi savers being able to invest their own savings in big New Zealand infrastructure projects, instead of seeing an increasing share of New Zealanders' own savings being invested offshore. I think that, oh, yes, go for it.
So do you think the tax settings are right to balance the investment that we see into property versus investments in business?
Well, look, we are really concerned about our housing challenges as a country. Housing has become progressively less affordable. Home ownership rates have declined. Rents have increased dramatically as a proportion of incomes. And I think it's to the shame of us all that last night, on average, several thousand kids went to sleep in a motel room. So we have to build more houses. And there's a number of things we have to do there. Partly it's about the planning, partly it's about infrastructure, partly it's about zoning. One of the other things we have to do is make sure the settings continue to encourage people to invest in building new homes. And you will have seen that Chris Bishop announced a policy to encourage build-to-rent housing, to bring in investment to build those homes. And I'm told that just with the tweaking of those investment settings, that there has been renewed interest in people coming to invest in that kind of housing in New Zealand. That can only be a good thing. If there are more rental properties, that's going to create more options for tenants.
Minister, in John Ross, in Lower Hutt here, the City Council come 1 July will be charging for an average home $85,000 in fees for every additional home that is built. On top of that, the actual cost of those homes is another $25,000 for detention tanks. And then you've got the H1 standards, which we, in this lovely world climate, we could argue aren't necessary.
Yeah.
And they are adding another $25,000. So for each home, you're around about $130,000, $150,000 of costs that could, well, they just go straight to the bottom line. This is without even constructing them. Have you got any plans to tackle those big costs?
Yes, we do. And you must be in the construction industry to have such a good detailed blow by blow of those costs. We want to make it much more affordable to build a home in New Zealand, because while land costs are part of it, when you compare how much it costs to build a home in New Zealand with how much it costs in Australia or just about any other developed country, it is too costly here. Now, as you highlight, there are a number of factors that go into it. Part of that is about the readiness with which our builders can get access to competitively priced building products, and we've got to fix some regulations up there. Part of it is actually about how clunky the consenting regime and the permission regimes got, and part of it is about the regulations. So Chris Penk, our Minister for Building and Construction, has been given a pretty clear task by the Prime Minister, and that is make the changes which will make it more affordable to build homes in New Zealand. And if you've got good ideas, which I sense that you do, about how we achieve that, look, I'd really love to put you in touch with him, because our view is that there are enough people involved in New Zealand who want to see these things become more practical. What we have to do is listen to them and put some of those ideas into action, instead of putting them into the too hard basket. Thanks for your question.
Hi, Minister. Artificial intelligence is taking off internationally. I'm just curious if there's any AI-specific investment plans or strategies for the current government.
Yeah, look, great question. I mean, when I look at the world, there are some things that I see as increasing challenges for the life that my kids will have. You know, they're growing up in a world with climate change as a reality, where there is more instability in the geostrategic environment. But I also see a world with massive opportunities, and I think we have to see AI in that light, because it actually has the potential to unlock significant productivity. So we've got a Minister for Digitising Government and also for Tech, and her name's Judith Collins. You may have heard of her. And she is passionate about the potential for AI. Now, what she thinks is important for a country like New Zealand is that we first get the ethical frameworks right and we think carefully about it, because no one will participate willingly in new innovation that uses AI unless they can be confident that their data and their privacy is being protected within an ethical framework. So she's doing thinking there. But I think we do need to think about AI in the context of digitising government as well. Too many services that New Zealanders seek to access online from government are still pretty clunky, and AI has the potential to make it easier for people to get the information and the services that they want. And so we do need to be thinking about that. And, you know, if you look back in history, it's new forms of technology that unleash revolutions in productivity, whether it was the car, the train, the computer, Google, and I like to hope that AI could be one of the next ones.
Thoughts on compulsory KiwiSaver? It's hugely disinflationary and it's investment in the long term in New Zealand.
Well, look, that's not a coalition government policy. I can only speak for my own party in terms of our thinking about that, but our view has been that many New Zealanders choose not to partake in KiwiSaver for a range of reasons which are particular to their circumstances. And while we maintain a really strong commitment to the supports that are in place to encourage people to enter KiwiSaver, we've been shy about compulsion. But I hear you. KiwiSaver is a positive thing, and having people participate in it, I think, is good for the country, particularly, as I say, if we can see more KiwiSavers able to invest here at home. Yes?
Will there be a liability recorded for the carbon credits we need to purchase to meet RNZ 2030? Because I've just seen that there's a recent decision by the International Accounting Standards Board that recommends that it's now recorded for the emissions that have already taken place.
Well, look, I took some advice on that earlier this year, and the advice that I received from Treasury at that time was, for various reasons, they felt that it wasn't appropriate to record New Zealand's national development contribution as a specific liability. You'll appreciate they've had to give a lot of advice on this matter because it was an issue of debate between James Shaw and ministers in the previous government. So they were pretty confident in that advice, and I tested it. But look, you know, obviously we'll have to keep an eye on developments, including the one that you refer to.
Minister, you mentioned infrastructure earlier. We've seen a number of larger, somewhat costly projects that have been stopped that I think most people would disagree with. So the sector is looking at a short-term period of uncertainty with a promise of long-term development. What is your government intending to do to provide more long-term certainty for the sector so that investment can occur and we don't lose people that we're going to need in the next few years?
Great question, and this is exactly the speech that Chris Bishop's giving in Queenstown today. So the first thing that I'd say is I'll let the dollars do some of the talking, which is that in our budget we will commit an additional $7 billion in the multi-year capital allowance. I think of the multi-year capital allowance as the country's growth and resilience fund. It's about making sure that we've identified the investment that we will be making each year into furthering that infrastructure pipeline. Our approach in coming into government was to do a bit of a survey of where infrastructure development was at. And what we found was that there had been huge amounts of money allocated, but often in ways that were not very well connected to a rigorous business case, to a delivery plan, to a sequence. In some cases, the government was competing with itself for resources and inflating the cost of projects. So we've been pretty determined to get the delivery piece right. One of the big bits there is about consenting. New Zealand is a costly place to get permission to build something, and that both increases the time to build a project, but also the uncertainty and the cost of doing so. So our changes to resource management law, including the fast-track consenting bill, are pretty important in that regard, particularly when it comes to some of those significant national projects. The second piece of work we've given priority to is the government policy statement on transport, which sets out 15 major projects of national transport significance that we are committed to funding in concert with the private sector. And we've set those projects out to give people confidence about here's the pipeline of activity that we are committed to. And that also includes an ongoing maintenance and renewal program for our roads. Chris Bishop has been charged with the task of creating a practical 30-year view infrastructure pipeline Because the point you make is the one that is raised with us again and again and again by those in construction and engineering and design, which is they would have more confidence about investing in their workforce and bringing over big bits of kit if they could see it wasn't just for the project in front of them, but for the next project and the next project. So we're working really hard to set out that pipeline and give people confidence and certainty in our investment frameworks.
Great to hear about that pipeline. And having spent close to 2 decades delivering and consenting key infrastructure in the UK, one of the major differences I saw here returning is the nature, scale and repetitiveness of business cases. What do you think we can do to get cross-party support on both the fundamentals of the infrastructure we need, but also the detail of the solution so that we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel?
Look, it's a question that we get a lot, and I think having that 30-year view is one of the important things, because there are some projects that I find it hard to believe any government would argue against. You know, when it comes to building the schools we need for a growing population, when it comes to ensuring we have health facilities to service the needs of an ageing population, when it comes to transport projects. So it's useful to have a pipeline set out so that people can have confidence that whatever government is there, some of the work will continue. But I've always been one who's a big fan of democracy. And part of democracy does mean that incoming governments do need to have the right reserved to say, well, we're not going to do that project, we're going to do this one instead. And I recognise that that can be frustrating, but it is the will of the people, and democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. So, you know, I'm a fan of it myself.
Yeah, we have an ageing population in New Zealand that's going to have an increasing financial burden. How does this government want to deal with that? And is there going to be anything in the budget to deal with it?
Well, look, you're right. That is one of the long-term fiscal challenges that we will face, one of the long-term population challenges we face. I think one of the most important things we need to think about in relation to it is the productivity and efficiency of our health system. Because actually, one of the major costs that comes with an ageing population is the delivery of additional health services. And so it's going to become very important, I think, that we have health services that use the best that technology has to offer, that are productive, that are constantly looking for new forms of efficiency, that adopt medicines that have breakthrough impact well. So we are, as a government, doing a lot of work alongside the Health Minister, Dr. Reti, on thinking about how we make sure that our health system is evolving to that growing demographic challenge. I think the other thing that is always present, and we should never lose sight of, is the best way to be able to afford more of the things that we need and want, including support for our elderly citizens, is to grow this economy. Because growing economies are wealthier economies with more revenue, more choices, and better support for people.
I'm going to ask one, maybe 2 more questions,
Sure.
Minister. The first
I have to say, these questions are much sharper than the ones I face in Parliament.
You mentioned roading earlier, and part of the announcements around that were around funding Malling, the Cross Valley link here in Lower Hutt and a Taranaki to Granada. Can you give us a wink or a nudge as to what level of funding we might see in the next year in your budget for these, or is that too top secret?
So my wink is that the MP for Hutt South, Chris Bishop's been a major fan and sponsor of those projects and has made significant personal commitments about them. And my nudge is that he is the Associate Minister of Finance and the Minister for Infrastructure.
So it's all on Chris, that's great. The second question is regarding water. And so water in New Zealand has been a very topical issue for quite some time. It's a major driver of costs, both nationally and locally. If we hear our local councils up and down the country, they're telling us that the major driver for their increases in rates and costs comes from funding water. It's obviously not your portfolio. It's an expensive issue, though. Where does that fit within your current budget? Thank you.
Look, it's really important, and you will have seen at the weekend we made an announcement about new arrangements for water care in Auckland. And the important thing there is that we've now given confidence to both Auckland Council and Water Care that they can hold those assets off the Auckland Council balance sheet, which will both allow Water Care to borrow more, but will also give Auckland Council more headroom. And so the result of that is that there is now renewed confidence about the investment in Auckland's pipes that can occur, and confidence to ratepayers that their rates aren't going to increase as much. Now here's the thing. The last government spent $1.2 billion investigating ways to achieve that, and I can tell you we spent a lot less than that on coming up with a practical solution for Auckland. At the same time, we have been working on what the models need to look like for other areas of the country, and I think what you've seen here in the Wellington region is a willingness by our local councils to explore new ways of working together to deliver water infrastructure more effectively. Our approach is about having a good economic model in place that requires water entities to set out what investments they will be making over the medium term. That also ensures there is local ownership and control retained, but giving those entities the ability again to hold those assets off balance sheets so they can do longer term borrowing for what are longer term assets. We're making really good progress. We'll be in a position to make detailed announcements soon.
Just a question on the income tax relief and tying it back to inflation. So if that income tax relief was repurposed to pay back borrowing or reduce borrowing, do you know how quickly that would bring inflation back in line with the Reserve Bank's advice?
No, but what I can say is that would be a major breach of a commitment that we have made to working New Zealanders. And I, along with my colleagues, looked many people in the eye during the election campaign and pledged to them that we would stay by their side and we'd be at their back. And some of those people have watched while their purchasing power has been eroded. They've had panic attacks in the grocery shopping aisle. And one thing that we promised them we would deliver was letting them keep a bit more of their own money. And that remains a priority for us.
Last question.
Nicola, you've spoken a lot about things you're going to do to help the New Zealand economy internally. New Zealand is primarily a primary exporter in terms of generating overseas revenue. So what cutting plan do you have to adjust to what our research has shown is a global market which is turning down? The bond markets are a mess, the global sort of financial and fiscal markets are a mess. What sort of plans does the government have to increase productivity for New Zealanders, because currently we've got the lowest productivity in the OECD, and also to mitigate any global sort of factors which are going to prevent you doing what you want to do?
Yeah, well, look, there's a few bits to your question. One of the things you rightly identify is that there are challenges across the global economy, and we're conscious of that. And I could stand here and talk for 5 minutes about all of the problems and complain about it, but I prefer, and our government prefers, to focus on the things that remain within our control. You will have seen a concerted effort by our ministers to be visiting countries around the world with whom we think we can build stronger trading connections. This is an important point because what New Zealand needs to have is a diverse range of markets to which our exporters can send their products and from whom they can extract greater value. I continue to see a really positive story for New Zealand primary producing exporters. Our quality food remains in high demand. It is seen as safe, it is seen as sustainable, it is seen as high quality. So I think we need to focus on that agriculture story as a story for the future. At the same time, of course, we need to be across a diverse range of modern sectors and industries, and we see great potential in software as a service, and aquaculture, in some of the service industries that have started to flourish here. In terms of the productivity question, if I had that silver bullet, I would fire it straight away, I promise you. I think actually there's kind of 5 main things that drive productivity. One is education. We have to get better at that. The fact that educational achievement has been plummeting so quickly should be of deep concern to us all, because what's the number one predictor of the productivity of your economy? It's the education and skills of your people. So we have to get education right, and our government's very focused on reform there. I think delivery of better infrastructure will better support productive growth. We need to ensure that we have a better regulatory environment, that we are more open to overseas investment and capital. There is a clear connection with how closed our economy has been to capital and how that's constrained our firms. And we need to make sure that, as I say, we're focusing on that trade, that investment, that international connection. And to your point, sir, getting that research, science and technology piece right, which is, yes, about the targeted investments, but also about keeping our regulatory environment up to date. You know, the fact that we haven't had a biotech regulator means that our primary industries have had to wave goodbye to a lot of great IP and good thinking that might otherwise have been developed in New Zealand and added value to our own exports. So no silver bullet, lots we can do. I can tell you, underneath everything in our economic plan is that goal. We've got to improve productivity in New Zealand. Thank you for being the person who asks about it.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.